Go.
So, welcome back to Friends of Tracking. Once again, so I'm Catherine Pfaff. I'm a math professor at Queen's University, and we're here again also with the co-host, David Sumter. And then this is actually an episode that, well, I shouldn't say, actually, I'm very excited about this episode. I kind of recommended this because so many of you have been asking about, how does one end up in soccer analytics? What is it actually like to be in soccer analytics? What do you need to know? All these kinds of questions that, we don't necessarily know. We're professors. If we make it in, we're coming through a very unusual route. But we brought in 4 people who came in through their own unusual routes and ended up in soccer analytics. We're really excited to hear from them. And I'll let you tell them more about it. So each of them will tell you more about themselves when they're actually going to present. Well, we'll let each of them, why don't each of you actually introduce yourself before we get started? Why don't we do that?
Wait, who starts?
Let's start with you then, Ashwin.
Ashwin, would you like to introduce yourself?
All right, I'm Ashwin. I'm nearly 18. I live in Bangalore, and I work part-time as a scout and remote scout and analyst at Dundee United. So, yeah.
Thank you. And he'll be first to present, but he won't present yet because everybody's going to introduce themselves. Hannah.
Hi, so I'm Hannah. I run a data analytics consultancy, working across multiple clubs, as I'll explain during the presentation, but a couple of my current clients are the national Belgian team, so that's working across the men's and women's game, and then also Blackburn Rovers and the English Premier League.
Amazing. Sam?
Hi, I'm Sam Gregory. I'm the Director of Analytics at Inter Miami here in MLS, and I've worked in a variety of other roles in analytics over the past 6 or 7 years now. So,
wonderful. And Rob?
Hey guys, I'm Rob. I most certainly am not nearly 18 years old. I'm a football project manager at FIFA, but I previously worked with both Norwich City and Leicester City in the Premier League.
Amazing. Okay, so without further ado, shall we start with Ashwin?
Oh, all right. Okay, yeah. Give me a second. I'm so sorry. Yeah. Hold up. All right. Okay. Is this? I'm sorry. Wait. Okay. Okay.
So you're gonna share your screen.
All right. Is this working? Is this working?
It's perfect.
Wait. All right. So yeah. For starters, something everyone who's heard me speak knows. But I'm the absolute worst at speaking in situations like this. I stutter and stammer like crazy. I have a high-pitched voice all of a sudden. I talk way too fast. I develop a list that I don't normally have otherwise. And yeah, but bear with me. I'm going to try my best. And yeah. All right. So something else that I think something else about me is that I'm honestly, and this is probably the wrong thing to say in something hosted by 2 maths professors, but I absolutely despise maths. To be honest, I am absolutely horrible at anything to do with maths, data, or coding. And I mean, in school, maths is like my arch nemesis, and even now, the data side of things is absolutely my weak point. And if not that the other side is very strong, but yeah. So in general, I think my journey to analytics generally been more based on my interest in football rather than having a decent understanding of stats and data. I mean far too often. I'm going to try my best not, but yeah. So in general, it's so the work they do is extremely basic and simple, and yeah. So I'm just going to get started here. All right. Oh wait, is this? Why the heck is this no? Okay, I'm sorry.
People in the chat are telling you that they love you, and don't worry. So you're so go ahead and keep on going.
All right, okay. I just realized this isn't. All right, I'm sorry. I'm not sure if it's frozen. Okay, I'm sorry. I need a second. All right. Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm so sorry. Yeah. Okay.
So why don't you take a deep breath and figure it out, and why don't we actually just switch over and do Hannah, and then we'll come back to you.
All right. Okay? Thank you so much. Yeah. Thanks so much.
Okay. It makes you feel better, Ashwin. I'm also nervous, so don't worry. I'll know. Okay. Let me share my screen then. Okay, can you see my slides?
Yep.
It's great. Beautiful.
Okay, so my route into football was probably not that traditional. Unlike Ashwin, I was a super maths nerd. I loved everything about maths and statistics and economics. But when I was studying, I didn't really know how I wanted to apply that. So I wasn't sure where my passion lay in terms of work. And mostly that was because I didn't really realize that sports analytics was a job I could have. So I started my sort of data journey in working in retail, and then I moved into finance, and then I worked in recruitment analytics at a university. And I suppose that's where I first started to think about how you could utilize data to support recruitment. And then alongside that, I was also working, volunteering with a charity, and we wanted to look at how we could demonstrate the impact of the charity, and it was a community football team. And I started using data analysis to support them as well. And that kind of sparked my interest in, well, perhaps I can start to combine these uses of data and analysis, but I still didn't really understand how to turn that into a career. So I suppose I just kept building on my own experience, trying to volunteer where I could, trying to grow my technical skills. And then one day I saw a job at Everton, and I suppose in theory, I didn't really have the experience, but I looked at the job description and there were a lot of things on there I didn't have, but also there were a lot of things on there I felt I was very strong at, and also I felt like I could demonstrate my potential. So I went along to the interview and I got the job, and I've never really looked back. I absolutely loved my time at the club. I worked there for 2 years as a football information manager. And then from there, I wanted to sort of gain more and more experience in the industry and work across national associations and work at other clubs. However, at that time, the roles weren't really there. Data was kind of starting to really emerge in clubs, but sort of the full-time sort of strategic roles that I was looking for didn't exist. So I thought, well, perhaps I can start to convince clubs that this is what they need. So I decided to start my own consultancy and take the route of if clubs don't have a data analysis environment, I'll try to show them that they need one and they want one. And as part of that, I've worked over the last few years for the Belgian National Association, so working with their recruitment, talent ID and recruitment department, looking at how we can use analytics for squad selection across the youth teams, the senior men's teams and the senior women's team. I've been working with the Premier League in their youth development department, and also most recently I've started working with Blackburn Rovers. So initially working with their senior recruitment team, but now starting to look across into the academy and work across departments as well to see how we can embed analytics across the whole club. So my presentation is going to be a bit less technical maybe than the others. I don't really have things I can show because most of the content I use is confidential to the club. But what I really wanted to focus on today was just to highlight that the role in a club is obviously being very technical is really important, but actually there's sort of 4 corners to my role, because I'm there to do data analysis, but I'm also there to sort of bring to life the data culture and demonstrate to the club that there is a department or an environment or a culture that I want to help them build. So the first part of my job really is to understand the environment. So to be in tune with the club philosophy and to understand the way things work, what are the dynamics across the departments, who's currently using what, is technology in place, how much data analysis is there already, who might be key to helping deliver the project. So are there analysts in place, or are there practitioners who have a sort of a desire to learn how to use the data analysis tools? And that is a really important part of the job, because if you don't understand the environment and you try to sort of shoehorn your own way of working into that environment, then you're not really going to have the impact that you want, because you're working in a team sport, a team environment. So you really need to learn to adapt to that way of working. then another large part of the job is sort of gathering the requirements. So although I will go into a club with ideas of good practice that I've seen before or what I might think would be useful, it's also really important to listen to the needs of the people in the club. So what do they think is important? Because it's not always the same thing that you think is important. And then that initial requirements gathering also allows you to identify some areas where you may not think that project's going to have a really long-term impact, but it's going to get really good buy-in because it's going to excite people and it's going to be something that they've wanted for ages, they've wanted for years. And maybe it will only take you a couple of weeks to do, but actually it's going to get people enthusiastic. And from the very beginning in a data project, that's really what you want, is enthusiasm. The third element is then developing the infrastructure. So that's where the technical expertise comes into place. But quite often, it's not just me developing that. I will often try to use the skill set from across the club. So a lot of my role isn't actually the end build. That was my roles of when I started working at Everton. But as I've moved into the consultancy role, my focus is to try and sort of upskill people across the club and build a more sustainable environment. Now that's probably more unique to smaller clubs with a smaller budget. Obviously some of the more established clubs or the sort of clubs with bigger budgets have huge analytics teams, maybe like 10 people, but some of the clubs I work with have nobody or an intern or a student on a placement. So we can't just rely on that one person doing everything. And it's really important to create that analytics environment where everybody can become a data analyst if they have a bit of enthusiasm for it. And then the fourth element is the implementation. So you build something, you think it's really good, you think it's really insightful, but actually then you need to spend the time over the season making sure that integrates into people's day-to-day processes. And a lot of that is being in the room, being present, just being around people making decisions and asking and answering questions and pointing out, well, oh, have you seen this report? Or have you seen this bit of analysis? Or working with the practitioners and saying, why don't you think that this is being used to support the decisions? Is there anything I can change? And that is also a really important part of the job. So I feel like the data analysis is actually just one part of the puzzle. And therefore it means that in order to get into analytics, you need to also be really a people person and understand processes and just be able to demonstrate your passion and get people to sort of trust you and buy into what you're trying to deliver. So I suppose my advice for people trying to get into the environment would be, although focusing on your technical expertise is really important, think about that experience of getting to understand the actual day-to-day operations of a club and how each department works, how sports science works, how recruitment works, how the academies work. And that will allow you to then find your place in the club. And if there's not a place in the club, it'll help you to create that place in the club. And don't be afraid to approach clubs and ask if there is a way you can help. So I suppose maybe I've been running over my time, so I might just hold it there and go up for some questions.
Great. Lovely, Hannah. I'm just going to take your, oh yeah, you did it yourself. Great, you take your presentation off. Can I ask a question? I mean, I think you actually said something which is very relevant to Ashwin as well, that you said everyone can become a data analyst. So you don't have to love maths or hate maths or you don't have to have that relationship yourself. I mean, that's what you're trying to install.
I'm probably dead off. I think I might be proved that you need some sort of expertise, because I'm actually horrible at this stuff. I think in my case probably proves the opposite.
Yeah, and I think that is true. If you have a passion for analysis, like maths, and having a sort of a specialism in maths is one really specific area and a really valuable one. But equally, there are lots of different ways that a data analyst can work in a club and benefit that environment. And it's important to not be, I suppose, too put off by, oh, well, I've not got a PhD in physics, therefore there's going to be so many people who are above me in the list of people who can go and work in the club, because there is definitely a place for that person. And the work that they can do and the insight they can produce is really valuable. But it's a big enough team to have lots of different skill sets, and you can just become part of that team and complement their skill sets. So yeah, I think that's just what I wanted to highlight really, is there's more to data analysis than the building of the model or the output. It's about people actually as well, and processes and sort of influencing and trying to get buy-in and enthusiasm. And actually building enthusiasm for the use of data in a club is probably one of the hardest bits, but actually one of the most rewarding.
So actually, there's going to be a question for Hannah, but then I just wanted to say that I think a lot of times when people say, "Oh, I don't like math," it's there's aspects that sometimes people get tripped up on, but a lot of times, like once you get used to it, there's so many different kinds of math, and there's so many different kinds of things that math can do, that it doesn't mean that you won't learn to love it and you can't do it and so on. I see so many people turn around from that, from that idea of, oh, I hate math, to like, oh wait, I can do this and this is really cool. So give yourself a shot in general with mathematics. That's a math professor's take. But so there was a question, Hannah, about, because you mentioned the team, and somebody was actually asking, so within your agency, so is the team that you're working in, part of the analytics team for a club, or does your agency have a team of people working in it?
No, so at the moment I just work independently, and when I talk about building the team, I mean sort of so the data team within the club. So for example, when we were implementing the project at Everton, there was sort of just me centrally for a while, just by myself, but working with the analysts across each department. So people who probably, when I first arrived, not everyone would have considered themselves to be like the data analyst of that department, but actually they sort of demonstrated that they wanted to learn sort of data visualization tools, or they wanted to learn how to use sort of data processing tools or data analysis tools. And I worked with them across each department, and I suppose we kind of formed our own unofficial sort of data department. But I actually think that is a really effective process to have the subject experts become really intertwined with the data analysis, because I learned so much from them, and hopefully I was able to teach them as well. But I think it was quite an effective way of working, and that tends to be what I look to do across different clubs.
Did you find people are open to these sorts of ideas? I suppose you're into clubs where somebody's hired you and given you money to be there, but it's not necessarily the people that you interact with on the ground who are the people who said that you should be there. Do you find that people are open and willing to listen and to engage?
Yeah, and I suppose it, maybe not from day one, and not often because people are hostile to the use of data. And I think data is sort of on the TV when you're watching football and on social media, and it's kind of everywhere now. So it's more accepted that data does have a place in sport. But I think often just with my role in particular, it's people understanding why I've been brought in, or what are you here to do? Like, well, what are you going to help us do? What are you going to change? And the way that I get by in there is just by having conversations with people. I'm being patient. So on day one, everyone's not going to be as excited as you are, maybe because they don't know why you're there. But once you start to build small use cases and demonstrate things through concepts that are easy to understand, and it's easy to see why having something, bringing in data or using information or bringing in technology has helped that process. And maybe usually I often start with ones that will save you a lot of time. So if there's something that just can quite easily be automated and save someone a lot of time, who can then focus their expertise on doing something that's more valuable, then that's usually a good use case to demonstrate why you're there. And then you can just build up from there. And then also it's about being sort of personable as well, and just blended into the environment, I suppose.
Can I take up one thing you said right at the start when you first applied for the job? You said you saw there were lots of things you weren't suited for, but you thought, oh, wait a minute, there's a few things that I am strong in here, and I can apply. And I think, could you expand on that? Because I think that's so important for people when they see these jobs? Because now you're here, you know, 5 years later, you're working for a national team, you're working for various teams, you've got your own consultancy and so on. Can you just expand a little bit on that process?
Yeah, so I suppose there's a tendency, especially I think in football jobs, but in jobs in general, to obviously list everything because they're looking for the person who has everything. But so there were a lot of sort of technical elements listed that I'd had bits of experience in, but I'd not really been in the work environment long enough to really have built up a huge list of experience of things I'd done technically. And then also there were a few requirements around sort of work experience in football, like desirable things around sort of like understanding coaching or performance analysis, or having worked across recruitment and have a specialism in youth development. But and I didn't really have any of those, but I felt like I also had some things that it wasn't listing that I brought from other industries, and I felt like maybe that could benefit the role that they were looking for, because I'd been able to see things in other industries that were good practice, but also that were bad practice. So I kind of just tried to highlight that, but I didn't think I was going to get the job when I went for it. I'll be honest, that it was a long shot, and but it did teach me to sort of think, well, actually, the world of football is not as closed as you might think it would be, and people are open to different skill sets and different backgrounds if you can show how you'll bring energy and passion, I think. But yeah, don't be put off by the job description. They're always longer than they need to be.
You're actually not the first person. There was somebody on Twitter who works in American football who was kind of creating a list of things that kind of answering that she gets a lot of direct messages with people asking questions. She decided just to, put it all in one thing. And one of the things she said was, you don't have to have all of the qualifications listed. They get a little overly ambitious, I suppose, at times, maybe not even sure. Like you said, they know that you're here, but they don't quite know what you're going to be good. They're not sure actually what they're looking for. They're like, oh, I'm supposed to have a data analyst. And so, and often, especially if you're going into a club that wants to start a data environment, they're not really going to have anyone who can say, well, this is what the job description should look like. So, you've also got to put yourself in the shoes of the person writing it and use that to not be intimidated.
Can I ask a question which sort of expands out to everybody here? Because there's a good question in the chat here from Bulent Kalafat. He says, how stubborn are football people with little to no background in data when presented with unorthodox advice? So if you have a go at answering that question, Hannah, then maybe we can do a round and see what the rest of you think. Like how open, or not how open are they, but how stubborn are they was the question here.
Yeah, I suppose I think stubborn would be the wrong word to use, really, because I think when you're introducing concepts to somebody whose subject expertise is different to yours, you've got to try to tailor your message and make it relevant. And sometimes people will just not want to change, and that happens across all industries. And for those people, you've just got to decide if it's worth putting the energy in, and if it's the way that you're presenting, or if they just don't want to listen because they don't want to change. And some people want to work in their own way, and that's just the way they will always be. But most people are open to the concepts if you can demonstrate like how it's going to impact them, how it's going to benefit them. And that's why when I spoke earlier about understanding the environment, understanding the processes that already exist, like if someone's not taking advice and you're really confident in it and you think actually this could be really beneficial, well then go away and think about how you can reframe it and how you can become more personable, and maybe take a couple of weeks to build a relationship with that person on something completely different, and then come back to what you were trying to influence them with. Because often it's not them being stubborn, it's maybe you just not doing your job well enough.
Good. Can I maybe I'll throw in Rob on that one then? And
so look, I think what I would say here is it's about context, right? So if you just bring data to people who don't want to hear, then some people are more receptive to numbers. Some people can't. I've worked with people who struggle with digesting numbers. For me, it's always about context. So how can you, my last role was in recruitment, for example. We wouldn't ever just present the data of a player. We would want to provide the information about why we think they're suitable. How would they fit into our environment? Provide the video that backs up what you're trying to say. And so for me, I think it's about building on exactly as Hannah said, like thinking about the way you're presenting it, and then just really putting in that evidence in place as well, and just providing that context. That for me is the thing. Really, context really is king in that respect.
Sam?
Yeah, I mean, I would basically echo what Hannah said. I think if you're coming up against someone who seems to you to be really stubborn, there's a good chance you're doing something wrong in presenting it as opposed to them. I mean, if someone has believed something their entire life and built a career on doing it, and then you show them one graph and say you're wrong because of one graph, you're probably not doing your job very well. So I would say people who are in football are smart people who have done the work, and they have their jobs for a reason, just like you have your job for a reason. And I think it's on you to make sure that you're working with them and kind of helping bring them along this journey, rather than just challenging them and then saying, oh, they're stubborn because they didn't listen to me.
And Ashwin, what's your experience at Dundee United with stubbornness?
All right, yeah. So I think so at Dundee, I don't have a real answer to this, because at Dundee United, I mean, I don't really go. Obviously I don't live in Dundee, and I'm not in contact with everyone at the club per se. But so I don't really know. And as for the people I am involved with, it's all people who know the side of the game. I mean, I think know more about, I think, the use of analytics in football a lot more. But apart from that, on Twitter, I think I think been putting out data on Twitter for like 4 years now, and of course you have lots of people antagonistic to seeing data in a game, and I think so. I try to present my stuff, but as clear, simple, and easy communicable as possible. And I try to sort of present it less as, I don't know, as one absolute truth, or again, not many people do, but that's an idea people generally have about analytics, as like using one number to prove again, like Sam said, to debunk your entire your preconception or whatever. But I've been trying to be I think less. This might be informed by the fact that I'm not sure of anything I do, but I try to present my views into being less sort of certain on everything. And okay, that's what you get me. I think trying to be, I don't know, that this is what this says, rather than this says, this proves that X. I don't know.
Yeah, no, fantastic.
Yeah. Well, and then actually, so there are actually a lot of questions that I was also kind of looking that work well for the entire group. I'm wondering if we should, do we want to ask them now, or do we want to kind of?
I think maybe we go on. Well, let's get some other presentations going. There's a lot. I think that we move on.
And if you want, so I just want to ask, if you want, Ashwin, instead of doing your presentation, do you want to just tell the story about how you ended up doing, working for Dundee?
I think, yeah. So all right. So I think so I didn't have a slide about how I ended up working, end up with this. So yeah, I'm gonna try to sum it up quickly. So I've been blogging for, I think I started blogging in May 2016. So it's been 5 years since I started blogging, and funny enough, I think a big milestone in my Twitter account was that I replied to you, and David, I replied to you, and you replied back. That made my my day. And anyway, the story thing here. But anyway, so yeah, I was so I've been doing this since I was 13, and I was I'm sorry. All right, yes.
Can I just say something about that? Because I think what's amazing about that, and about with Twitter or whatever, is that I would have had no idea that you were 13 years old, or however old you were there.
Yeah,
and I didn't. I mean, and you seem to, from what I could see on Twitter, know a lot more about Chelsea in particular and analytics in general than I did. So I was happy to answer your question, because you seemed a very knowledgeable person who I could learn from. So I think that's just one of the most amazing things about Twitter, that you kind of, in some sense, I mean, it's not always like this, but some sense the sort of background and and it's just what you know and what you want to discuss and talk about that counts. And I think that's just incredible.
All right, yeah. So I tried my absolute best to. I didn't tell anyone about my age till like last year because I guess 17 sounds less weird than I don't know, 30-year-old doing numbers. Yeah. So yeah. All right. Yeah. So I've been doing. So I've been putting out blogs since 2016, and since then I started writing for a couple of sites here and there. So there was the now defunct site Chance Analytics, where I think with a bunch of people who are quite big in the community now, and where I learned quite a lot, and then a bunch of other places like Between the Posts and World Football Index, and so since 2016, I've been putting out data visualizations onto it regularly. I think on all sorts of things, and and so as I slowly amassed some followers and I think met new people, met wonderful, all the wonderful people on Twitter. One of those people was Stevie Green, the head of analysis at Dundee United. And one day I think October sometime, I think I was at a restaurant having dinner, and I look at my phone and I see a message asking if I'd want to be involved with the club. So yeah, that was it. I think it's absolutely crazy. I still think that I'm living in a simulation of some sort, like that. But yeah, I think on a load-seeing machine, whatever. So that's what it was. So I think so I think it's been lots of articles and so on stuff here and there, but that's what it is. All right. So should I?
So they found you through your blog or Twitter?
Stevie. So yeah, I've been friends with Stevie for I think since 2018ish, because so I think we just knew each other then, and I know, and he just sent me the DM in October 2019. So I'm not
And then you're able to work, remotely. So you're still living, or do you still live with your parents?
Yeah, of course. I'm not even 18 yet. Yeah.
I don't know. It was a question that I thought I knew the answer to, but it was worth asking. So, and then they just send you the data, or what do you actually do then?
So it's obviously I'll be talking about that in the presentation, but so the data is from Wisecout, from their online platform, I think, rather than the raw data. But and as a result, it's also, again, for someone who's absolutely horrible with data and coding and stuff, it's easy to work with for me. And so all right, so I think so it's, and I've been working with Stevie Green, and more recently with James Monty, I think one of the I think at Arab Analytics on Twitter, I think one of my favorite people, new people on Twitter doing regular content, and he's absolutely wonderful, and you should check his work out if you haven't already. So this sounds like a anyway, this sounds like a paid promotion or whatever. All right, I sound robotic.
Okay. So do you want to? So you still want to go through your presentation? So do you want to take about? Yeah. So just to keep things moving, do you want to take about 5 minutes and go through like the key parts of your presentation now?
No, I'm ready. I think I'm.
Okay, let's do it.
I've been covered by this. Yeah. All right.
And everybody loves your hair. They're getting a lot of comments in chat. Everybody loves your hair. But let's go for it.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. All right. So as I explained, as I said earlier, I'm absolutely horrible at speaking, and I'm horrible with maths and data and stuff, and so the work I do is extremely basic and simple. So let's get started. All right, so here are my main responsibilities, and so start off, I reiterate that it's quite a small role to be in as part of the whole process. I only actually need to spend to get the work they do done. 2 or 3 hours per week, but it's just out of interest. I spend lots and lots more, and so it's generally to add value to the process at different steps of it. So so it's not as big as I think as some of the others here presenting would have. So the main thing I do, and the thing I love doing the most, is looking for players we can sign in for the first team. And I think this is again this is something I'll be getting to later, but this wasn't my main responsibility to start with. I think if I remember correctly, the message cell the team sent me was something about providing data with and about and team and something based on, I think, assessing our own performance. Again, I'm going to get to that, but where I basically started, I just basically really want to do this part, and that was, and I started doing this too. So yeah, and this was what this is the other main thing that I do, which is, I think, is present. I mean, I don't do presenting, but yeah, I compile numbers, data viz to help encapsulate our performance as a side, and the end of that is of our players to see where we're at and where we can improve. So yeah, and apart from that, I do all sorts of things with a bunch of miscellaneous, maybe sometimes collaborative projects, and that and yeah. So to be honest, this is the part. Recently, I think I'm most happy with my work here, and I've been really happy with the work that I've been doing in this aspect. But unfortunately, I don't think I don't want to share sensitive info around. So I don't think, I'm sorry, but I can't really mention too many examples of this. So yeah, so one example is, I think, occasionally opposition scouting with data for bigger games. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, which I didn't do a lot, didn't do very well. But anyway, it's okay. Yeah, all right. So let's get on to the players scouting side of things. So yeah, so for everyone to look at, I make dashboards and data viz for everyone to look at, and I think is, so these are on Tableau in custom filterable interactive dashboards that I think might be helpful to people in the club. And yeah, so, and apart from that, this is where I spend most of my time, but yeah, I spend lots of time looking at players who would be who would fit our side well. I think so. So I think something that a few people ask me is whether I'm limited to certain areas, but I'm not. I just look at everywhere where anywhere that I can find data or video, I look for players. And yeah, so it goes. I think Vice itself has large range of leagues and competition and youth competitions to look at. And yeah, I spend lots and lots of time there. And I think I think I'm all right at finding talent. I'm absolutely horrible at gauging whether they're realistic signings, and I end up like a horrible scout on an FM game, and I like mention yeah. So yeah. All right. Anyway, so yeah. Yeah. So and so apart from, I think, just find them, I occasionally I think for players I like the most, I use data and and video to give a wider in-depth view of the player, and it's usually through 5-minute videos, and or at least they're meant to be 5-minute videos. The last time I tried, it became a 10-minute video. Anyway, yeah. So all right, yes, all right. So okay, yeah. So I'm just gonna here's an example of one type of dashboard I make. So yeah, normally this does have labels for the players, but I just remove them just in case. And yeah, so I mean probably fair enough. But anyway, okay. And side note, I hate that if this is a white background stuff. It's messed up with the aesthetical aesthetic that I'm meant to go with. I probably should have changed it earlier. But anyway, all right. So okay. So as for, I think, for individual play performance, you've probably seen this kind of stuff on Twitter all the time. I think I know it's quite generic, but this is the stuff that I use to describe this. Data viz I use to, I think, show the performance. I'm sorry, yeah, to show players' performance statistically. So I think, so just like with stats on radars, I think these have become quite familiar to people. To people working in football. So, and I think they work really well as a result. So yeah, I think, so yeah. Now, as for assessing team performance, so yeah, I think, something I provide data viz to 4 game reviews of our performance, where we so I think where we look at where we are right now and where we can improve. And so these regular and I mean so these reviews have info on a bunch of things from on many facets of our performance from so again, like if it's say, I think whether we're meeting our objectives for chance creation, I think on how well we move the ball forward, or our defense, our set pieces, and so on. You get the point. So it's probably not it's probably not analysis from myself here. It's usually me just putting out the info for others to interpret here. So I think I'm just gonna bombard all of you with a few examples, but I think here's this. So this is something standard I use for the bar charts. And again, I know these are simple stuff, but at the end, this stuff people can understand really easily. So and then scatter plots. Oh my God, I'm so sorry, I forgot to mention. I can't believe I forgot to mention this, but I think about dashboards and scatter plots. I think honestly, I think they're probably the most useful tool for, I think, in football analysis, in terms of, I think in terms of having interactive scatter plots with multiple players being listed and being interactive, so you can mess around with it and see come and make your own conclusions and stuff. So so like 90% of the data viz I do is scatter plots and bar charts, but they just work. So so I guess So again, I'm just throwing in a bunch of examples here, and I do the expect goals race maps, so that turn tapestries as the season progresses. And all right. So and here's an example of the player level visualizations I make. So I think with our own players highlighted, and I think there'll be multiple of these kinds of visits, and so we can see to derive insights from. So all right, so okay, I didn't really know how to just a side note, I didn't really know how to end this, and I didn't know how to title this side either, but anyway, and all right, so so I think I think, as I've said all this time, the work I do is extremely basic and simple, but at the same time, while it is well, I absolutely do need to improve on the data settings and I think learn coding and everything. I'm not necessarily unhappy with how basic and simple the work they do is right now, because I think the emphasis, I think I place the emphasis on how understandable the work that I do is, rather than how in depth or advanced. And to be honest, it's embarrassing to be on Friends of Tracking with like ridiculously where people present extremely advanced stuff on here and just throw out stuff that's probably new in 2014 analytics Twitter. But anyway, so all right, and again, so I said responsibilities, but at the end of the day, I'm just this work in general and the stuff they do is completely motivated by what I want to do. And I think just I do anything that I'm interested in. There's a two-way. There's a freedom here where I can I think present new stuff, or rather than being given tasks. But all right. So and that's it. This is abrupt, and this ended up being abrupt even with this slide. But I'm a massive thanks to every single person who's watched this, and a massive thanks to anyone who's had anything to do with. I think if you look any of this thing, if you looked at any of my videos, if you read any of my articles, if you follow me or DM me or anything, I love all of you. Thanks so much. All right, okay, I'm going to stop. Okay, all right.
Okay, thank you, Ashwin.
Fantastic.
That was great. It's very interesting, and I think one of the key points in there was, which also ties in with something that Hannah was saying, that a lot of it is about how you're going to communicate this to the teams, and that being able to come up with these charts and visualizations and so on that actually make sense to the teams is a lot of what they really need. Okay, so nice. Do we?
Oh,
So
yeah,
David,
sorry
do
for
we
sorry
want
being
to?
sad. I was okay. Yeah, sorry for not saying anything. I was just sorry. I was just stressed. I'm sorry. I should have said something, but why am I thinking it was Amy? Oh, I'm sorry.
Wait, what did you want to say?
No. No. Sorry. I just said I should be saying I probably should have said something. I know I had nothing to say, but yeah, I'm sorry. My brain just turned off for a second. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay, it's also the middle of the night in India. So if anybody doesn't know that, it's the middle of the night in India. So we've done this twice to poor.
No, okay. If anything, this is my prime time. I go to sleep at 3 a.m., 4 a.m. every night. So
okay, but you don't admit that.
Well, you've got amazing comments on the chat, Ashwin, and it's really good to hear your story. And I think one thing I took away is exactly as you say. I mean, we do quite a lot of very advanced things, or we're doing these kind of machine learning and deep learning and all of this type of stuff. But often when you want to communicate what's an important decision about a player or how it's going for the team, it really comes down to those two-dimensional plots and getting them right and showing the right information. So I think I really liked your conclusion after you started off completely dissing maths, the conclusion that simple messages at the end of it is really what it's all about, whatever techniques you're using.
Yeah, I think so also there is someone, I think, again, so as I said, James is someone at the club to present the more advanced, innovative side of things, and so he does. Honestly, I feel really, really jealous each time I see something with his share on the group chat. And yeah, I'm just really, yes. So yeah, and yeah, but see, it's nice that there is someone here doing really advanced stuff. So it's complicated. I think, yeah.
And actually, so I saw Sam and Rob kind of nod their heads when they were talking. Do we want to take? I'm curious if it's okay just to hear about how they actually, before we kind of move on, about how they actually present things to coaches, or to, I don't know whether you present it directly to coaches or your teams, or because we've heard kind of both Hannah and Ashwin bring that up, and I saw the two of you nod a little bit about this also. So I was curious if you wanted to say a little about that.
Yeah, I guess it just comes down to, it completely depends on who your audience is. So I mean, there's some people at the club, like we have a performance analyst here at the club who really understands a lot of data stuff, and we'll get really deep into conversations about what I see in the tracking data or specific things. And then there's other reports that are much more for like, that will just get to higher up at the club, and maybe to people who are less technical and just want kind of that final result. And a lot of the time that will look more like, it might, I mean, Ashwin is saying some of his work is simple, and some of the work that will be presented at the final stage that I have is sometimes way, way simpler than anything that Ashwin showed. So it would just be like, yeah, something comparing two players on one metric or something like that.
Interesting. Did you want to say something about it, Rob?
Yeah, so I mean, I think, yeah, just to back up what Sam said, really, I think a lot of it depends on the audience. I think what you generally want to do is keep things simple and digestible. Also, you know, when you're working in a football club as well, you know, quite often you're dealing with people who don't really have a lot of time on their hands either. So sometimes you really need to get those key takeaways across as quickly and as succinctly as possible. And I think, like I said earlier, you know, again, context is king for me as well. You know, it's giving those simple messages, giving that background information, that detail about it as well. But I mean, yeah, when you'll see with my presentation, it follows very similar lines to Hannah and Ashwin so far, in terms of a lot of what I did is very, very simple work. It's about automating things and making people's lives easier using the data. So hopefully we have a consistent message.
Do we want to jump into Sam, and then we can address more of the questions later, or did you want to?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah. Okay, Sam.
Yeah, let me just share my screen. Is it sharing?
Yes, we can see the beautiful pink and black logo.
Nice logo. One of the best parts of working at Inter Miami is we have.
Oh, but he's done this reverse thing. You're seeing the presentation. You have to click on the swap displays button.
Where's swap?
Top
there we
left.
go.
Yeah, there you go.
Beautiful. Okay. So yeah, I've been working in football analytics now for, I think, 7 years, and I was still 4 or 5 years older than Ashwin is now when I started. So I wrote for Sportsnet, which is a TV station in Canada, had the Analytics FC podcast in its first iteration. That would have been, probably 5 or 6 years ago. Worked for Opta, who are now Stats Perform, a company called SportLogic out of Montreal. And then I've worked for 2 clubs, so York United in the Canadian Premier League, and now I'm at Inter Miami. So essentially, when I came to Inter Miami, these are the areas that I really wanted to affect within the club. So the first one is recruitment and scouting. And this is essentially one of the big reasons I was hired, is to help make sure that every decision we make on a recruitment standpoint is influenced by data. And there's also the performance analysis side. So this is kind of what Ashwin was talking about with team analysis. So this is preparing for upcoming opponents, analyzing ourselves, so looking at how well we executed our game model. And then there's the sports science and athlete monitoring side. So that's more looking at like physical data, how much do players run, what type of running they do, that sort of thing. And then I would say this last part, which is research and analytics development at this point, given that I've only been in the role for 4 months, is more aspirational than something I've actually had time to do. But this is sort of asking bigger questions about the nature of the game, about MLS in general, and sort of how we can use data to answer these bigger questions about the sport and about the league. So the people that I interact with on a daily basis, my boss is the sporting director at the club. So him and the director of recruitment, we talk about recruitment decisions. So that'll be looking at like short lists, identifying potential targets. And then also when we get players from agents or players who they know from their past experiences, just having like that data check to say, okay, this player meets the needs that we have for an Inter Miami player, or can you tell me something about this player that I might not have seen in the one game that I've watched so far? So there's that aspect of it. And then there's the performance analysts and the coaching staff. So our head coach, Phil Neville, brought with him two of his staff members from his time at England. And so that's his performance analyst, Alex Scott, is the main person that I interact with from a first team perspective. So preparing things for the coaching staff, again, whether that's analyzing our own team or analyzing an upcoming opponent. And then the sports science team as well. So those are the guys who are monitoring essentially loads and what our athletes actually do. And so this is how the data flow that I have set up at Inter Miami works. We essentially have 3 different sources of data. So there's a few others, but these are the main 3 are the event data. And it's the event data we use for recruitment purposes mostly. So we have over 40 competitions on, and we can compare our players to players in all these leagues. We can use to create short lists. And then we combine that with the tracking data from cameras. So in MLS, that's Second Spectrum who collects this data, but there's Kyron Hago is another one. There's quite a few, and there's some that even do it from broadcast now. So SportLogic, where I used to work for, do this. But currently we only have this for MLS. So this creates a bit of a challenge where then you have event data on 40 competitions, and then one of those competitions you have this optical tracking data on. Given that this is Friends of Tracking, I'm assuming I don't need to define what tracking data is, but for those who don't know, it's essentially you have the exact you have the XY location of every player, usually 25 times a second. So you get way more detail than just the granular event data. And then finally, we have the physical data. So this is looking at, again, this is a lot of this you can get from the optical tracking data, but there's additional things like heart rate that you can't get from optical tracking data. And for this, we'll have this on Inter Miami only, because this is what we're monitoring about our own athletes. So all of this goes into a database, and then there's various reports that I generate. So I have custom questions, which is just someone comes to me and says, when was the last time we did this? How many times did we do X, Y, Z? Can you show us where we are in the league in this category? And then there's more kind of automated reports. We have opposition reports, post-game reports, own team reports, player reports, and shortlists. So these 2 are mostly automated. And then there's also kind of interactive tools which other staff members of the club can use. In terms of the tech stack that I use, so all of this, again, is stored in a database, which I use Postgres. I found this to be like a really useful database tool, and it's hosted on AWS. So this essentially with this Postgres database, I just can store tracking data. I can store event data, and you can store. It's just to me, Postgres is a really nice way to store like different data sources in one place. I think like as you get more and more like big data, there's different solutions people use. I know some people like data lakes and things like that. I'm still at the stage now where I can do most of it in Postgres. And then I use for analysis tools, I use RStudio and Python, well, R and Python, but I think anyone who respects their own time uses RStudio instead of base R. So there's RStudio and Python, and the main one I would say is Python. This is sort of where the analysis happens. The data storage is in Postgres, analysis mostly in Python with some R. And then the front end that other people at the club can use, I'm essentially building out using Django, which is a web development platform that I like, which works with Python. And that's stored on AWS as well. So essentially, we have this big tech stack, we have all these data sources, and it's to serve these essentially these three goals, which the first one is we want every single decision that the club makes in soccer operations to be at least informed by data. So it doesn't mean that every single decision we make needs to align 100% with the data. I'm not the one who's making these decisions. I'm just helping decision makers. And so I just want to be sure that every time that we as a club make a decision, whether that's on the field, whether that's in recruitment, that decision, the person who's making that decision has seen data, which has helped that decision maker have kind of a better holistic view of what is going to go into that decision. So as long as I feel like that sort of has been met, that decision maker has seen some data by the time they make that decision, or they've been told about some of the conclusions from data, then I feel like I've done my job. Obviously, I'd like to influence more and more of those decisions, but that's sort of the goal of the department. And then just to learn more. So learn more about our team, learn more about the league, learn more about the sport in general, learn more about which players perform well in this league, what leagues we should be recruiting from. And then at the end of the day, also, we want to educate these decision makers. So it's not just them coming to me it's not just me going to them with data and saying, here's a report, here's what I think, but it's them starting to kind of think in these terms. So think about, oh, I have this question, and I know that the best way to answer this question is to use data. So maybe I can ask Sam, maybe I can use a tool that Sam's created to help answer this question. And that's sort of one of the end goals, is to make sure that these decision makers want to use data to help inform these decisions. And it's not something that is sort of pushed on them, but it's something that they seek out and that they want at the club. So yeah, in 5 minutes, that's essentially what I've tried to set up here at Inter Miami. And we're still in the early days of this, but I'm pretty happy with how it's going so far.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam. I feel like we first have to ask the question. So somebody wants to know how you get your hair as luscious as that.
I get a lot of sun here. That's good for your hair.
That's the key. Everybody needs to move to Florida. Okay.
I want to ask, hair aside, like there's so many things you have to be great at there. Like there's databases, there's programming in Python, there's like then making visualizations afterwards, like making tools or whatever. I mean, how do you have time to do your hair when you have to do all of that stuff?
I mean, I think the first word to use there is great. And I really don't think you need to be like great at all of these things. I think a lot of it, especially like coming into Miami, where it's building an analytics infrastructure from, I mean, there was not really anything here from on an analytics perspective when I came. A lot of it is just trying to there's a lot of small wins that you can make. So it's trying to get as much up and running as quickly as you can at the start. I think over time, then we'll go back. Like if you had either a front-end developer, a back-end developer, or anyone come and look at any of the infrastructure here, they would probably be like, you're doing this wrong, you're doing this wrong, you're doing this wrong. And they'd be right, but it's like this rickety system is up and running now, so I'm happy about that. And so I think that's the first part, is it's not really, at least at this stage, it's not really about being great. It's just about having something that's helping make decisions right away, because we can't really afford to say, the club can't afford to say, oh, we're going to hire someone in this role as director of analytics, and they're going to come good in 2 years' time. That's just not the way football works. So I would say that the other thing is, again, I've been doing this for like a long time. So I've gained a lot of skills. I've learned from a lot of really smart people. And there's so many great tools online as well. So a lot of this, like, it's not that I've figured out a way to do this. It's that I'm just stealing work that other people have done. So for databasing, for example, Ben Torvany recently posted this tool. It's DBT is the name of the tool. It's essentially this database management tool. And he posted this whole GitHub repo to take in, I can't remember which data sources, it might've been Instat, I think, data. It's essentially how to build a database. And the entire repo is there to build a database from Instat data. So the tools are kind of already out there. The same with data visualization. Like there's so many good packages now, which are just public source packages. So MPL Soccer, which is Matplotlib Soccer, is a really good one. GG Soccer on which again is Ben Torvany as well. He's one of the, if you want to follow someone who's done like loads of good public code, Ben Torvany is the best one. He's released so much public code on his GitHub. So that'd be a great place to start. But I think a lot of it is, I don't want to say like standing on the shoulders of giants, but there's a lot of like work that other people have done that I can, coming into a club, I can just grab that work and immediately apply it to my own processes.
Well, actually, so I kind of wanted to know, so it was just related to some of the questions here because people are asking about, and they have in many previous sessions also, like, what is your education like? What did you major in? Did you do a master's? What kinds of classes did you find most useful, other than just these things where you can learn stuff from other people or online? If people want to get started first with their education, are there things you'd recommend, and also you would have done differently?
Yeah, so I did economics. I did an undergrad and master's in economics. And my undergrad, I had a minor in math as well. So I did quite a bit of math. But like, I mean, kind of to Ashwin's point, like I used the math that I did in my undergrad now. Sorry, I shouldn't say this with two math profs on the call, but I use the math from my undergrad like never, basically. I'm sure some of it has sort of informed my thinking in like subconscious ways, but I'm never like solving differential equations or doing anything like that anymore. So I think economics probably informed some of the thought processes and the way I think about decision making, but I don't think it's really informed and I guess it's kind of forming those pathways and understanding how to work with data. So that was probably valuable, but a lot of it is just stuff I've learned like on various jobs. So when I first started working at Opta, I'd done all my coding in Stata, so I didn't know any Python, and now I haven't touched Stata in 5 years because I learned how to use Python and R on the job, which I find like way better tools. So I think, I don't know better tools, but better tools for this kind of work. So yeah, I definitely think like my education helped me, but I would say learning outside of my like formal education was way more valuable than the like economics or math work I didn't. Again, I'm with two academics. It's terrible stuff to be saying, but
I would be really interested to sort of push this out. I mean, to Hannah and Rob as well, especially as like, if we're giving Ashwin some advice, should he bother taking a maths orientated degrry? Do you think that it's worth it, or should you just get stuck into
in my mind, I'm
not.
I'm absolutely not. I like put it, I'm going to be taking a social sciences humanities degree. I am absolutely not. I'm not going anywhere near maths or science. I'm so sorry.
Okay, well, let's put it more like this then. Hannah and Rob, persuade Ashwin to that you need to study maths.
That's a difficult one for me because I think I got a C in maths GCSE and I didn't go to university, but then I was a qualified accountant, so I don't know. No, look, I mean, I look back now at maths classes and stuff, and there's things I wish I'd take from there. You know, trying to draw things like radar charts and stuff in Tableau. You know, you need to know maths to be able to do things like that. So there's lots of good positive things there, and I think actually Sam's point just now in terms of economics, I think is huge as well. You know, there's a lot of people working in football data who come from that background. Obviously Sam, his former colleague Tom Warville as well, I think similar background. You know, there's a lot of people there. I think the nice thing about economics in particular is it gives you that grounding in the models and also some experience in the tools that people go on to use as well. But I mean, I think, yeah, when I give my talk in a minute, I think it'll become clear that I don't think it matters what background you come from in some respects. But definitely, I think with the industry is moving more towards that kind of mathematical statistical modeling. You know, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit still there for a lot of clubs, but I think at the top end, a lot of it is becoming a lot more complex and a lot more detailed. And so that statistical mathematical knowledge is really important.
Well, that's me out of it. That means this is probably the end of my analytics journey, whatever. But yeah, in any case, I don't plan to put all my eggs in one basket in terms of sort of committing to analytics. So I think I'm just gonna study what I'm interested in, and what I'm interested in is social sciences, humanities. I'm absolutely not data science. So yeah, so I'm just gonna sorry all of you.
No, that's fine. It's absolutely fine. Hannah, what about you? It was statistics and economics that you took.
Yeah, so I suppose like I didn't really consider what to study when I studied. I loved maths. I was really passionate about it. But I was also aware that from my education, I didn't have a lot of practice of sort of writing papers and I was really interested in politics. And I kind of just wanted to also learn, introduce myself to new concepts and new ways of studying. So where sort of the school I went to, the college I went to, not many people went to university at the time. It was really a bit of the unknown. So economics sort of felt like a compromise between being able to do maths, which I loved and I was confident in, and try something new, integrate a bit of politics into my studies. But I think the main thing I took from university was just learning how to learn, and that's what I've really applied. But in hindsight, if I could go back again, I think I probably would study more around mathematics and computer science, because I would have then had to spend a little less time learning that on the job. And also, if I was to build a team around me, I think, over time, if I, was in a club with a lot of money and I got to hire four people in a data analytics team, I would take one person who was really strong, maybe on the visualization side, but also definitely there'd be a room there for someone who was had a lot of advanced knowledge in mathematics, or maybe like a different type of science that could bring in another way of thinking, especially as data collection gets more and more detailed. There's going to be techniques that people are learning coming through mathematics and universities that I've never even come across, because I'm too far removed from that now. But just because it's not really played a part in my role, I definitely think that it is going to play a stronger and stronger part in the world of football. So if that's where your passion is, go and study that. And if your passion isn't in deep learning, machine learning, mathematics, then find your strengths and apply them, because data analysis is a huge field. It's not really for one type of person. So yeah, that would be my view.
No, I think that's really important, because that's kind of why we got a different mix of people with different backgrounds on here, because I think there is a possibility for anyone with any background to find a way and to contribute something to this. It's not just about having the really advanced math skills. I mean, I think why it's Catherine and I, who are both maths professors, presenting this. I'm not quite sure how it got to be that way, but that's not meant to be the message, that it's just some kind of exclusive world of maths. Often the more advanced skills are useful in one thing, but definitely the communication skills, the visualization skills, they're all very important.
Yeah.
I think
I actually think that's connected to something that I was going to say, that part of where a mathematics background can help is actually also just in learning to problem solve and learning to visualize. So if I'm looking at or stuff I'm working with my students on, the first thing I would say actually is that when I all these projects I'm working on with my students, and I've taken on a whole bunch more of them and so on, the first thing I actually want them to be able to do is code in Python. But after that, I feel like a lot of where mathematics comes in for me is it's not necessarily in the advanced math. I know it's a lot of it is just in the ways I've learned to look at things. And so it's in some sense you could look at it and be like, wait, I don't see where the advanced mathematics is in what she's doing. But then you'd like look, and if you look at kind of the stuff I've been doing in soccer, and you look at my other papers, and you're like, oh, that kind of actually looks really similar. Like somehow or another, just the experience in bringing in different kinds of, sometimes even basic tools to solve problems. And a lot of times that's what you need. Not to expound too much, but I was talking with some physics professor friends of mine about the fact that they wanted somebody to give a presentation on, what was it, like ball dynamics or something like this. And they were saying, oh, those are incredibly those are incredibly difficult questions as to how, like the ball that's curving and so on. They're like, people haven't solved like differential equations are extraordinarily difficult. But one of the things that we kind of learn to do sometimes in advanced math is to take a very like impossible, difficult situation and find like kind of this simple way to describe it so that what you're actually doing in the end is not complicated math. It's graph theory, combinatorics, linear algebra, but what you learn to do is to take that incredibly difficult problem and break it down into a combinatorics or graph theory or linear algebra problem to at least approximate it and to come up with that kind of solution. So it's kind of a plug for mathematics, but also is kind of a bit of a description of the perspective that one actually might come from with that.
Can I ask a question from the chat here? So I think this is an interesting one. It's to all of you just before we go over to Rob. A really good question from Sheikh Farhan Raza. He says, is the position of team analyst also as volatile as that of the coach or the manager who is suddenly replaced at the end of the season if the results go up and down? Who will I throw in on that one first? Sam, are you going to be out of your job in a few weeks?
I hope not. I don't know how to answer that question. Yeah, I don't think so is the answer, but that's, yeah. I feel comfortable in my job right now. Yeah.
I think, Ashwin, you've actually been in your job longer than anyone else here.
Yeah, so of course, yes, nowhere near as volatile. I think obviously no one, it's none of the work we do actually gets out into the public. So obviously there's no scrutiny, there's no public scrutiny there. So unless we really messed up, absolutely really messed up, which is something I've done quite recently, in fact, and yeah, quite embarrassing. But I don't, yeah, but it's absolutely not volatile at all. So it's completely secure, and yes, thank goodness. So yeah, that's all I have to say. But yeah, of course, obviously it's different from you because this is a part-time remote thing, and like honestly a tiny thing in the grand scale of things. But yeah, yeah.
And Hannah, you do different consultancies, so I suppose that isn't as big a risk.
No, I suppose, yeah, I work on a contract basis. So my biggest risk is, like, did I do a good job? Do people like having me around? Do they want to extend my contract, or, where's the next project? That's just the nature of the way I work. And I suppose it's a trade-off between security and job security and getting to work in a way that I find really exciting and I'm really passionate about, and getting to learn from all of the different clubs and environments. So yeah, there's always an element of risk, but yeah, it usually pays off. So.
And Rob, you've been in 3 roles in 5 years, but all successfully. So what's?
Yeah. So generally, I think people tend to move more for. People tend to generally change clubs because they want to take a step up, and there's not opportunities within their own club. So you tend to see people moving more by choice than through other means. I think you do see it occasionally. I know Gary Rowett, for example, the manager has a team around him, which includes an analyst, so I think is now one of his coaches as well. So you are starting to see it a little bit more, that coaches, that managers are adding analysts to their kind of or their kind of entourage, I suppose, as it were. But I think it's pretty rare in general to say people usually change clubs because they want change of scenery or to try and take a step up more often than not.
Because it doesn't, and Vinny Warrior, you were quite skeptical of answering the question, Sam, but I mean, it does relate to it because he says just now it's because the risk of decision making has not trickled to the analyst. But when you say that the club is going to be based around data and based around it's going to be a part of every decision, then there's going to be some sort of comeback on that if the decisions aren't the ones that want to be made, that you want to be made. You don't have to answer that, Sam, but
I feel comfortable answering that question because I think really, for me, I want to give what I think is the correct information to the decision makers. So if I say, if I give 5 players in a row to our sporting director and director of recruitment and say, I'm 95% sure this player is going to be a success. I'm 95% sure this player is going to be a success, and none of them were a success. Well, you can do the math. What's 0.05 times? The odds of that happening if I was 95% sure are very, very low. So I think it's on me to give the correct information to the decision makers, and then to keep that information for posterity, to keep what I'm saying as like, okay, this is where I felt about this decision or about this potential player, and to keep like a record of that, both so I can learn from it, but also so I can be held accountable. Because if I'm saying I'm 100% sure on all these players who don't end up being a fit at the club, then I'm not doing my job well. But if I can say, okay, this player I'm pretty sure is going to be a success in MLS, this one I think could be really good but is more of a risk, then I'm giving just like what I think about that player. And then someone who's making a decision about, okay, do we want to renew Sam's contract, can then look at that and say, okay, did Sam give us the correct information on these players, and did he value the risk within a reasonable range for what we would expect at this club?
Okay, I feel maybe I'm taking up too much time here, Catherine. We have to get on to Rob for the last part.
Yeah, and then we can ask everybody more questions after that. So Rob, would you like to? We're excited to hear what you have to say. Would you like to begin?
Yeah, no problem. So look, I wanted to tackle this from a slightly different perspective from the other guys. I think it's probably safe to say I'm comfortably the eldest of the four presenters, so I kind of wanted to give a little bit of background to people in terms of how I got into the positions I got in, because I've come from a fairly unique position, I think, for a lot of people. So so my background, I worked for Vodafone. It's a mobile phone company in the UK and worldwide, as a qualified accountant, and I spent time working for them in London, Dublin, Milan. My role kind of evolved over time into more of a finance analyst, and then moved into the kind of business intelligence space. I decided to leave finance and move into sports because it was something that I was more interested in. I wanted to find more of a passion. And so I briefly enrolled in a performance analysis master's, and I interned as a performance analyst at a professional rugby club in London. So I spent time there filming training, live coding first team matches. I got to travel with the team, which was awesome, performing opposition analysis, etc. But I quickly realized that for me, I thought performance analysis was kind of going to split into three strands, kind of more video analysis, tactical analysis, and data analysis, and I wanted to work in more on the data side. I think, as I mentioned, I wasn't particularly into maths and stuff when I was younger, but I did like working with numbers, which is why I ended up as an accountant. And that kind of data step was kind of felt like a natural step for me. So I joined a company called the Information Lab, who are a visual analytics consultancy. I was taught how to use tools such as Tableau, Alteryx, SQL, and was able to work with a variety of real life clients to help solve their real world problems. This was like a really good transition for me from my work at Vodafone, but I was quite keen to find a way back into sports again. And the Information Lab had a number of sports clients, one of which happened to be Leicester City, and they were keen to bring somebody in to help them make use of the data they had available after they won the Premier League. So similar to what Sam was saying in the MLS, Premier League clubs are provided with data from Opto and Kyron Hago, or Second Spectrum as it is now. And so I was working with those kind of data sources, creating workflows in Alteryx. So for those who don't know, Alteryx is a kind of no-code data preparation tool. So it's drag and drop, very similar in some ways to Tableau, or the premise behind Tableau. So I created workflows in Alteryx to prepare the raw data for analysis and visualization within Tableau. I stored the data in an AWS database. And using this, I was able to automate previously labor-intensive tasks, things like post-match analysis, pre-match analysis, sports science metrics, and really help allow the performance analysis and sports science team to quickly and easily drill down into their data to identify trends in their performance. And so, excuse me. This is clearly not my work, obviously, but this is very similar to the kind of things that I did initially. Putting together shot maps. This is something that Stats Perform put together, but it was very similar insights like this at the start. This was 5 years ago or so it was quite early still in the analytics journey. And I was putting together simple visualizations, but just helping the performance analysts really. Again, as I say, automating lots of tasks, saving the team a huge amount of effort in manually collecting this and collating this data and presenting it. We were able to easily automate that and let the team dive into stuff. Working with the tracking data, you have to excuse the probably poor quality of the video here. But again, working with the tracking data to start looking at simple things like team shape. So here, drawing a convex hull around, but just fairly rudimentary use of the tracking data, but just starting to identify things like team shape and things like that. I moved on after a couple of years with them to Norwich City in a similar role, more focused on player recruitment before I left a couple of months ago to take up a role consulting with FIFA. But one of the things I kind of wanted to talk about was really, no matter what industry or company you're working in, as a data analyst or a data scientist, I think it's like Catherine said just now, what you're really focused on is solving problems, whether that's working in the back end on data preparation, analyzing the data or presenting your findings. I think generally we're working to solve problems. And so just as a simple example of that, one of the tasks I was asked to do was try and show some context behind opposition performance. And so we decided to do that by presenting a simple league table, essentially, and just showing, this was for Norwich City from 2 seasons ago, showing our performance against teams and where they were in the table. So I built a simple workflow. It took a list of results, created a league table to understand what position teams finished in, and then joined our results versus teams and visualize that. So what you can see here in green is matches that we won, orange is draw, and red is lost. And what you see is generally at home, our performance was excellent, apart from against the top few teams. But when you start to look at the data of when we played those teams, some of those were quite early in the season. But we actually struggled away from home against some of the lower league teams. And so this just helped give that little bit of extra context. But again, this was just a simple example of problem solving. This is something anyone can do really easily by scraping football data, football results from any website and just working through that in Python and R. But what it really did was it just meant they didn't have to manually collect this data, run through this and do this every time. Another example was I was asked to look at how many average changes to the starting 11 does a team make. Again, you can do that really easily by just going and pulling that information. But, actually, if you think about scoping that request, working through a solution, that then means you can do that kind of work once and then just refresh that week after week rather than having to manually go through and collect that information. And I think one of the things that we have as data analysts, one of the biggest tools we have is thinking about scalability and automation. Think about that in everything we do. That really is, for me, is the greatest power of the data and the tools that we have available. And that's, for me, is where we can have the biggest impact on performance within clubs. It's really about automating and scaling things out, I think. So yeah, that's kind of all I want to say, really.
Amazing, thank you. So you've been monitoring, I feel like, well, also thank you all of you for answering a lot of people's questions on the chat. So we're going to actually be able to get through more of them. But did you want to start, David, since you've been monitoring the chat more with questions?
Well, I had a question on my own, and it comes up about that last thing that you said there about scalability. So I have a sort of skepticism about that, because I often think that you need to solve problems, going back to that, and often those problems won't lead to scalable solutions. So maybe, I sometimes get worried about this in business in general and in football specifically, that people go around solving problems because they will be able to produce something nice to look at the end of it. And they don't necessarily solve the problems which are the sort of getting into the nitty-gritty details, and it might give you an insight or something like that. And I suppose I'm biased. That's the type of problem I like to solve. And I was thinking, how do you get that balance right?
Yeah, no, look, I agree. I think sometimes you are just trying to answer a simple question. The sporting director or coach comes and asks you something, and you will just go into the data, pull out that answer and think about it. But as an example, recruitment dossiers, you can go and put those together manually each and every time. But actually, that's solving one problem. But actually, what happens when you want to come and do that for the next player or for the player after that? A lot of what I've done previously has been quite customized depending on the circumstances. But I think trying to scale out as much as that as you can. So from a recruitment dossier perspective or a match analysis perspective, gather as much of that requirements and the simple data as you can, and then build around that. But what you don't want to do is spend a lot of time making something that looks great and presenting that, and then the next time you come to do it, you've got to go and do that all over again. So that's why I always try to think about scalability for me. But no, I don't disagree. Sometimes it is just a simple simple, quick and dirty answer.
Maybe have you seen something from the chat, Catherine? Because I was thinking about my own question. And I
No, well, actually, I mean, there's been a lot of questions that kind of, you know, like I feel like they're kind of questions for the group in some sense. Did we? Oh, so you didn't look at the question specifically for him, but I feel like there's been this accumulation of questions that are really for the group. If we want to just shift to a group discussion, if everybody's up for that, is that?
Yes.
That sounds good. Okay. I mean, although one thing that somebody asked 3 or 4 times to Sam, and we did, someone they really want to know whether, no, we're not going to ask that. Okay.
Okay, I will take another one.
Okay, no, okay, so we won't ask that one, but okay, yeah, why don't you take another one?
I mean, I think a lot of them, and we've already been into this, it's about what kind of skills you're going to recommend. So we've already talked a lot about maths, and what would you recommend now? So if you're want to get into this business, what should people go off and learn? We'll start with you then, Rob.
Yeah, so for me, I think one of the big things, and I think one of the themes from all 4 of us here, is visualization. I think if you want to get your message across to coaches, sporting directors, and the like, for being able to visualize your data. Now, that doesn't have to mean it's some complex dashboard or some complex visualization, but just being able to get that message across to a coach or a sporting director succinctly and quickly, I think is huge. So being able to learn some tools, whether that's Tableau, whether that's just charts in Excel, or whether that's, you know, things in ggplot in R or something, you know, but having those skills there are good. And also general data analysis skills, right? There's almost no point working in this field if you can't actually analyze your findings yourself as well. So it's great being able to prepare the data and being able to build these awesome models and things, but if you can't analyze that data as well, that's obviously slightly limiting your worth. You know, I think generally we call ourselves analysts, and so therefore I think you need to be able to actually analyze things as well. So for me, they're the kind of really 2 core principles, I think.
And that for you, what tools did that start for you when you were making visualizations and so on? When did you feel that really? Yeah,
well, I mean, so one of the tasks I had at Vodafone was building a corporate dashboard for the whole business, and a lot of that was done in Excel and PowerPoint or in PDF, creating hyperlinks. You know, the day I found Tableau was the day it was a good day. So for me, it was Tableau and Alteryx, because my background is not necessarily in computer science. I've learned a bit of R, and I'm doing some courses on Python at the moment and stuff as well, to try and get that little bit of background. For me, they were kind of more no-code options. But that does have a slight limit. You know, they tend to be more expensive. You need, you know, you require licenses and specific tools in that you know, often you don't get with some of the other tools. So there's positives and negatives to that, I would say.
Because we've done very few things in the Friends of Tracking videos on Tableau. I mean, and I think this is because of my own bias, is like it's been straight into programming with Python and R, but you can come a long way, and maybe even all the way with that sort of knowledge.
Yeah, definitely. I think in terms of tracking data, one of the limitations you have with Tableau is you can't customize the frame rate. So if you try and display movement of players on a pitch in Tableau, it becomes very jolty. It doesn't quite work as smoothly as it would in R or Python. But yeah, for sure. I mean, all of my work at Leicester and Norwich was all exclusively within Tableau. I think there's a huge amount you can do. Sometimes it's not necessarily the most efficient way of doing it. So for example, recruitment dossiers, you probably wouldn't want to build those in Tableau necessarily. There's probably more efficient tools you can use out there, but you know, lots of things can be done within Tableau.
Okay. And Sam, recommendations for, I mean, I know you were really early with doing all this analytics FC stuff. What's your recommendations for getting started with this?
Yeah, again, I sort of related to my answer earlier about using what's already out there, but I do think learning how to code is a big thing. And I think that might also be changing a bit now that I think Hannah made a good point about kind of specialization coming more into this field. So she was saying, oh, okay, if I could hire 4 people, I'd hire like a front-end developer, a back-end developer, one person. I think, actually, I'm just thinking of this. I think Man City have probably done this in how they've recruited an analytics team, is they have Laurie Shaw, who's obviously like an incredible modeler from the physics, like a physics background, really mathematically technical. And they've hired Ravi Mistry as well, who worked with Rob and sort of like an expert at using Tableau and creating dashboards, creating visuals. And they've hired someone like Chris Baker, who works with scouts and has done a really good job managing scouts and how individual scouts can use data in their processes. So there's that aspect where like, maybe if you want to get a role like that at a Man City, you should learn one thing and learn it really, really well.
Yeah.
Whereas if you want to be more of like in my role, again, I'm much more of like a generalist. I'm not as good at any of those things as those people, but I can do sort of lots of different things, and I have like a wide skill set, even if I'm not like an expert at any of them. So for a role like mine, I would always say learn how to code and learn how to do like Rob was saying, learn how to create visualizations in these different using these different softwares, learn how to model using these different softwares. But maybe that's sort of like just saying what's worked for me in like a one very specific role, because when you look at like the Man Cities and the Liverpools of the world, maybe they're hiring for much more of these like specialty roles now. So yeah, I think both kind of make sense depending on where the club is.
There was a question that came up in the chat, which is kind of relevant to you. I mean, if you're a sort of one-man show just now, I take it to some degree, what would be the next hire?
Yes, this is a discussion we have. I mean, I would like to make more hires down the road. I think it would kind of depend on where we are at the time. So I think like someone who has more of like a web development or a data architecture would be valuable. But I can also see someone who's just like a like football first data analyst. I can see that being really helpful as someone who can sort of be more of a bridge to the coaching staff and that sort of thing. I think it would just kind of depend on where. I mean, it's not happening now. Like I'm definitely not going to hire this year. So where my focus is right now might not be my focus in a year's time. So yeah, it would depend. But again, it's different for every club, because again, when you look at like Man City, who are building out this massive department, they're clearly hiring for like very, very specific roles. So.
And Hannah, you haven't mentioned this, but I heard a rumor that you're a very good football player. And is that a helpful quality?
It would be, maybe if it was true, but I'm just I'm a Sunday league footballer, and
but your team seem to appreciate you.
Now a five-a-side footballer. But yeah, I think it's always useful to have a passion for the sport, definitely.
But you have worked together, because it was the North Wales Dragons or something like this. So you'd worked together with them, doing some analytics for them as well.
Yeah, so they're a sort of a community football team, and they primarily work by putting on charity football matches, and they focus a lot on sort of the physical and mental benefits of football. And I've been working with them to help them to demonstrate their impact to then reach a wider audience. And that was kind of my first introduction into sort of football analytics. And yeah, I've been doing a bit of work with them to try and expand that out to the women's game. That's obviously something but it is something I'm really passionate about. And where I can, I love to make use of the platform that I often build in the men's side of the game, and help the women's side of the game to make use of that. And that's definitely something I would love to do more and more. But yeah, I think having a passion for what you do is really useful, especially because when you love what you do, like obviously your work is so much better, and but also like football can be frustrating, and like I mentioned earlier, there's lots of risks involved, especially for me. Like it's to make it worth sort of always maybe being a bit unsure what's coming next. I think having a passion really helps, and like enjoying talking about my job constantly all day, every day, which is pretty much what I do.
Finally, Ashwin, I'll ask you the same question. What would you say are the sort of skills that you would recommend to somebody who wanted to get started?
So first of all, I absolutely take up what Sam recommended and learn how to code and really specialize. I'm a generalist right now, and I'm probably going to be letting behind. But anyway, so I think I think for both I think it's mainly for people who are starting out and trying to get into the game. I'd say the absolute key to everything is being able to communicate your insights, and I I'm not very good at this, but I think if you look at I mean, both in terms of blogging and I don't know, putting out stuff on Twitter or something, and I think at club stuff again. I'm actually horrible at communication in the club stuff. Even if half myself is sending messages on WhatsApp, I'm actually horrible at it. Yes. Anyway, so I like, there's that Nagelsmann quote on, I think, on, I know, like on managing 30% tactics and 70% social competence. And yeah, of course, I think the 70% social competence part means I'm never going to be a manager because I'm the absolute worst social. Anyway, so you banned that. All right, so yeah, I'd say that I think with presenting, I mean, with analysis in football, it is. I mean, obviously not similar, not as the same ratio, but something similar to it. There's it's as much for presenting your insights and being able to communicate well than anything. And especially in football, I think at the end you have lots of skepticism about stats and deeper video analysis in the game in general. And I think the key really is it's presented as sort of, I think, to make sure you really underline what analytics and deep analysis adds to the arsenal. And I think and generally being clear about it, and sort of emphasizing just really being clear about it and getting a point across. And yeah, so whether it's being able to write well, whether it's being able to present data with good aesthetics, or just simply simply how you are on, I think, just how you putting your work out the world.
Ashwin, one thing I just have to say is, like, you have so much more social competence than I had when I was your age, by some incredible degree. So I think it's very difficult to draw that conclusion that you don't have social competence. You have amazing social competence. And it's just fantastic you can come on and talk to us about this. I think it's...
Absolutely. No, but thank you so much.
So there was actually a question earlier, if it's okay. There was one I wanted to, it was from way back before, which is why I was like, I've been waiting for so long to ask this, because they asked everybody about if there were, like, in your experience with data analysis, like, were there moments where you kind of discovered something that was like so much against common wisdom or something like that? Did you encounter circumstances like this? Do any of you have a circumstance like that?
I have nothing. I have nothing. Yeah, this is boring as hell.
So I'll give like a real example that happened the other day. Someone mentioned this to me and I was like, that can't be true. And I checked it. And it's true that the further up a field a throw-in is, the more often it's completed. Blew my mind. Yeah, because I guess teams want to keep possession in the final third, and in their own third, you're just trying to play the ball forward and like gain space. And so throw-ins are actually completed at a higher rate in the final third than they are in your own third. Which, I mean, it's a small example, but to me that like blew my mind when I saw that. I was like, that can't be right.
Is it also that you're trying to win it back more?
I think it's just a like distance thing, right? So there's way more long throw-ins in your own third, and then in the final third, it's a lot more about winning possession. And I think if you look, I don't want to get too much into it, but if you look like a bit further down into the possession chain, there would probably be more giveaways, because in the final third, it's often just a safe throw-in, which might be completed, but then the touchback might be incomplete to the player taking the throw. But there are like loads of little things.
I love this
like
stuff.
That,
I just want to do a whole Brains of Tracking episode on this throwing question, actually, now. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
About the throw-in question, or about what was the most surprising thing?
No, just the throw-in. Just the throw-ins will have no. But please take the next person, then.
Yeah, I mean, I've found countless players that the data says is amazing, and you watch the video, you ask a scout, and they absolutely disagree. But that's probably about the main thing that I found, to be fair. I mean, there are a million Messis out there if you just look at data sometimes. Again, it's about adding that context and actually seeing what's going on. But yeah, that'd be for me.
Yeah. When you say context, do you mean also, so do you find, like, if you're scouting, like how would you adjust to, you know, the leagues that people have played in, or that we just had when we had Voss speak when she was talking about, the difference between when you're playing in the Danish league and you're playing in the Champions League, and the space is so much different. Like, if things are so different in the different leagues, do you compensate for that, or how? Yeah.
That's the $1 million question, right?
Yeah.
If you can solve that, you'll make a lot of money in this business, that's for sure.
Do you think that that's kind of the main thing that makes you like makes you wrong in thinking that you found 1 million Messis? Or
sometimes, yeah, sometimes you'll find someone, you know, maybe let's say in the Belgian league, you know, who's scoring lots of goals or doing certain things, and you think, well, that's got to translate, you know, and then you go and watch it and you see what's going on and you're like, yeah, no, I don't think so. It's that kind of thing, I think. And I think one of the things we did well at Norwich, and I think that is one of the things they do great as a club, is they really know what they're looking for. They know what they need, and therefore they know precisely what will fit in there. Yeah, I think that's kind of, again, one of the best things about data is really knowing what it is exactly that you want, and then be able to use that to help you.
Interesting. Hannah or Ashwin, have you encountered these things?
Yeah, so I was just, sorry, Ashwin, do it. Yeah, so just thinking about sometimes just following on from what Rob was saying there, I think that's really interesting where at the moment there are a lot of gaps between potentially what the data says and then what like the human eye can go and see, because there are still gaps in the data. But as technology is evolving like quite rapidly, it's starting to fill more and more of those gaps, and that's naturally there where sort of those more specific skill sets are starting to come into play. And historically, it's been known that there are gaps in the data, but the data just wasn't there. So you would have to compensate, but often quite manually, or just by like being aware of the bias in the data, but knowing there's not really that much you can do about it. Whereas as data collection and technology evolves, we can start to use more and more sort of mathematics and advanced methods to adjust. But that's still relatively new to the game, and some teams will be doing that really well because they will have been able to adapt to the new data and technology because they have maybe the resource to do it and the finance to jump in while the price point is still quite high. But the majority of the football pyramid will be quite slow to adjust, and we'll have to wait for that technology and that data to become more accessible and lower cost, really.
Actually, Rob, I want to go back to, thanks, Hannah. I want to go back to this because this is something I've kind of thought about, is that in order to be an effective dribbler, like, so if you're playing with people that you're a better dribbler than like they are, then actually it's reasonably effective to try to dribble through everybody. Like Messi can do that because he's so much of a better dribbler than people are defending against him. But in my just kind of very layman observations, it seems like if you're playing against people who are more skilled than you, it's actually, you want to be like stronger at the most basic skills. Like you want to be able to pass really well. Like who cares whether you can dribble, because you're not gonna be able to dribble through the people anyway. But you like things like this. Do you kind of so are there some skills that are more transferable at the different levels than other skills, or?
Yeah, 100%. Look, I think one of the things that we found was that oftentimes if you look at the best players in some of the so-called weaker leagues, you know, they will be at a higher standard than some of the lesser players in some of the top leagues, you know, because there are a lot of those skills are transferable for sure. I think it's just about there's just so many variables, right, in trying to determine what can be transferred across and what will work. You know, I think it goes back to the point Sam made quite a while ago about you know, wanting to be able to give 95% confidence or something, I think it was, on a player. The reality is you can never be 100% sure, because you never know. You know, you might bring a player over who would suit the league, would suit the way you play, and could be an absolute world beater, and they might hate where you are, you know, particularly in England. You know, there are lots of teams in places that players have historically not enjoyed, you know. you can't always control all of those variables. You know, sometimes you might have done all the work you can, but as I say, they come over here, they don't like the culture, they don't enjoy themselves there, and therefore they don't fit in, and they want to move on again. You know, so sometimes things just come completely out of your control as well.
Yeah. Do we want to? I think that I in spite of it somewhat being my responsibility to keep track of the time, because there were so many people, I was letting it run a little longer. But now we're starting to head into an hour and 45 minutes. David, was there anything else that you wanted to make sure we did before we wrapped up, or you're muted?
Oh, yeah, I got on my mute. I think we are wrapping up, to be honest here. I'm just amazing that you've well, invested this time to come and talk to people, and I've seen everyone's been really active in the chat as well, and that's very nice. And I saw there was a campaign at one point to get more than 80 likes on the video so that Ashwin felt that he was at home and so on. So and we went to that. We've gone, I think it was 82 when I looked at it. So we definitely fulfilled that that quest to get lots of likes. So and that brings me, of course, to it's been very successful since we started saying at the end of the videos that you should subscribe. Please press subscribe now. So there's over 100 people still listen to the bitter end here. And so please, if you haven't already done, press subscribe, and then you will be updated every time that we're on live. Other than that, I'll let you wrap up, Catherine.
Oh, because actually, right, so we want to do the like and subscribe, but we got tons of them already. And the thank you so much to everybody for spending your time on this. I think this is going to have an impact for a lot of people. So it's really, I'm also saying thank you on their behalf, having watched them in the chat all these weeks. And I know there are a lot of people who are going to find this there's going to have an impact for them. So thank you. And I think the last thing we always have to try to remember. So the next episode is...
The next episode we haven't put up yet, but the next episode we'll be going into, we will be looking at possession chain value models. So now I've forgotten the expected possession value models. We'll be sort of doing an update. It will be quite a technical one. And now I've forgotten the names of the two guests we've got on. So I won't say too much about this, but there will be we'll go for a very, there's been lots of questions about data science and using different types of techniques from then. So we're going to go from the world of the data scientist just now to the sort of a much more technical presentation next week. So I'm not sure I'm selling it very well, but please tune in we'll be back to Thursdays from next week. And we also found out today that Sam's old friend, Tom Werville, who everybody now knows because he's been so successful using data at The Athletic, he's going to come on the 10th of June and talk to us about how data is revolutionizing the media as well. So lots of exciting stuff coming up. So lots of exciting stuff coming up. And thank you also to our wonderful audience who does amazing things like asks lots of questions and likes our videos before they even start, and then continues to like them, and so on. So see you in like almost 2 weeks. So see you in a week after Thursday. On Thursday, that will be the 27th. It's my son's birthday on the 20th. And,
so happy birthday to David's son, and then see you then.
27th.
Everybody. Bye.
Great. Bye-bye.
Thank you.